G'day, it's Xavier Morello here from Wildlife Exposure, and today I'd love to present to you some endangered species we keep and breed here at Wildlife Exposure. Sadly, here in Australia, we have one of the worst mammal extinction records of any country on Earth. We have around 6 million different species of flora and fauna in Australia, and many of them are endemic to Australia, meaning they're found nowhere else on Earth. Currently, around 1,770 different species are listed as threatened and endangered here in Australia. Around 300 of those species are threatened with becoming extinct. The main factors contributing to the loss of our wildlife are habitat loss, the places animals need to survive, and introduced pests such as cats and foxes. Australia being an island continent, much of our wildlife have not had the opportunity to adapt and evolve the instincts and techniques necessary to avoid cunning predators such as the cat and fox. This is my little friend Freido, and Freido is a squirrel gliding possum. Here in Australia, we have 7 different species of gliding possum. These agile acrobatic possums are able to glide through the air using a membrane of skin under their arm called a patagium. This small species of gliding possum is very vulnerable to predation from cats. So we can make a difference by keeping your cat indoors, especially at night. You can help support the local possum population in your backyard. Here in outer metropolitan Melbourne, we have a species known as a sugar glider. Sugar gliders are practically exactly the same as a squirrel glider, except the sugar glider is slightly smaller. The squirrel glider is listed as a threatened and endangered species here in Victoria. They're not found around Melbourne, but more in the northeastern parts of Victoria. It has recently been discovered that there are now 3 different subspecies of sugar glider. These possums sleep and breed in the hollows of old dead trees. We know it can take around 300 years for a hollow in a tree to form. Sadly, a lot of these hollows are cut down due to the fact that old trees are seen to be dangerous or useless and are often just burnt as firewood. But we do need to retain the old hollows so that these animals have viable habitat for the future. One thing we can do to help support endangered species and biodiversity in our backyards and bushland around our home is creating new habitat for animals. Nest boxes are proven to be a really successful way to create new homes for wildlife. Another extremely rare native Australian marsupial we keep here at Wildlife Exposure is the Brushtail Bettong, or woolly. One of 3 subspecies of Brushtail Bettongs we have here in Australia, or we had. Sadly, 2 of those species are now already extinct. The Brushtail Bettong's population has reduced drastically since foxes were introduced to Australia. There was believed to be around 2 million of these animals on mainland Australia, with now only around 15,000 left. This species of rat kangaroo is found in the far southwestern parts of WA, but there has been reintroduced populations into South Australia and New South Wales. This little fellow, what a cutie. The woolly or Brushtail Bettong is a type of macropod closely related to the kangaroo, and you can see why. Macropod means big feet, and he's got big powerful legs. He can hop and move quite quickly, but he's extremely vulnerable to foxes due to the fact they nest relatively out in the open, just under a shrub or bush. Beautiful small macropods are extremely important to the environment. They're eco-engineers, mainly eating fungus, spreading spores and seeds while their digging behaviour cycles nutrients and aerates the soil. Conservation breeding programs in predator-proof environments and rewilding programs are giving this little Aussie species some hope for the future. Unfortunately, without eradicating foxes and cats, re-establishing wild, sustainable populations are unlikely. One native species that has proven to have a real effect on introduced pests are dingoes. And dingoes are our native wolf here in Australia. And surprisingly to many, they are listed as a vulnerable species. There's lots of evidence showing that dingoes have existed in Australia for thousands and thousands of years. They're a keystone species culturally and ecologically. Dingoes are largely misunderstood native Australian animals, which is really worrying because they're vital for maintaining biodiversity of our plants and animals by controlling those very pests I was talking about, cats and foxes. It is a misconception that dingoes are all the tan colour like Khan here. So Khan and Cinder are alpine dingoes and they can be black. So around 4% are black. We also have a white coloured dingo too you get in the alpine areas. They can even be a variation of stripes and even spots. Dingoes are our largest land-based carnivore. And while in many parts of our country they are not protected and they are considered a pest, it has been proven where they are present there is a higher biodiversity of native plants and animals. They are like our Lion King here in Australia and really do need to be valued and protected. Another animal that's often underappreciated and undervalued is the fruit bat. The grey-headed flying fox is a species of megabat that we have here in Victoria. While these bats can be seen in large numbers in botanical gardens and flying over cities at night, here in Victoria and throughout Australia, their population has reduced by around 30% over the last 10 years. This is really concerning because these bats play a really important role. The work these animals do as seed dispersers and pollinators is critically important to the regeneration of our forests. The main factors contributing to these bats' decline in population is deforestation, decreased food availability, and an increase in extreme weather events such as heat waves. While fruit bats are not always the most popular animal, we do have to remember the important work they do for the genetic health of our forests here in Australia and around the world. Without these animals living along the east coast of Australia, we wouldn't have the lush green forests we know and love. This is Nina the barking owl. These owls are found all across Australia, except for central parts. Here in Victoria, they are listed as critically endangered, with only around 30 breeding pairs left in the wild. They're named the barking owl for an obvious reason. What do you think, Nina? Woo woo! Woo woo! Woo woo! The number one reason this species has declined here in Victoria is deforestation and habitat loss. They use the hollows of old dead trees to nest in and rear their young. Being a larger owl, they need large hollows, and it can take hundreds of years, as we've said, for hollows in trees to form. Some simple things we can do to help conserve their habitat is trying to buy sustainable and renewable timbers and papers, such as toilet paper, go recyclable. Making conscious, positive environmental choices can make a huge difference to the future of these species. While here in Victoria, the barking owl is listed as an endangered species due to a lack of viable habitat, in other parts of Australia, their populations are considered secure. This is Nino and Nina are part of our endangered species breeding program, and we're hoping we'll have some baby barking owls later this year that we'll be able to send around to other zoos to help grow the captive population. This next species is an amphibian, and amphibians have got the wet, slimy skin and are sensitive to the environment around them. Clean water is vitally important to amphibians. And here in Australia, we only have one type of amphibian naturally occurring, and that is a frog. This is a green and gold bell frog, an endangered species here in Victoria. Sadly, frogs are very susceptible to pollution, so water running off into our waterways has a direct effect on frog populations. In other parts of Australia, some frog species are under threat due to the cane toad, an introduced amphibian which is known to be toxic and poisonous, and also a very large predator that will also eat a lot of our native frog species. Frogs also face threats from new diseases such as the chytrid fungus, a fungus that kills frogs with no known cure. What can we do to help frogs? Well, it's simple. At home, be mindful of using chemicals that wash down the sink and maybe go into septic systems or into local waterways. Try not to use pesticides, which directly affects insect populations, which frogs heavily rely on, and also can pollute their waterways. This is Melbourne's most endangered frog species, the growling grass frog. They can be easily identified by the bright blue colour of the inside of their legs, and they can be green and gold in colour. This frog's a very dark colour at the moment because of the cold weather. They're vulnerable to introduced predators such as cats because this is a frog species that has been often known to come out and bask in the sun during the day. Frogs having permeable skin absorb air and moisture through their skin, making them very sensitive to pollution. So having a number of species of frogs in your backyard or in a waterway is a great sign that that waterway is most likely healthy and clean. They are known as an environmental indicator species, indicating to us the health of an environment. If you can hear frogs croaking, multiple species means it's most likely a clean and viable habitat for frogs and other animals. These are some of our growling grass frog froglets we were lucky to breed this year as part of our endangered species breeding program. This is Victor, and Victor is a Victorian carpet python or Murray darling carpet, and these snakes are listed as an endangered species here in Victoria. They're found in the northern parts of our state, up along the Murray River and around the Warby Ranges. The main reason this species has declined here in Victoria is habitat loss. There are largely arboreal snakes spending a lot of their time climbing up in trees and nesting in the hollows of the old river redgums. The degradation of their habitat by clearing of land and also collecting of firewood. As you can see, Murray's a great climber. These snakes need the old dead wood that falls around the base of trees to allow them to climb up into the canopy. While moving through the trees, these non-venomous python snakes consume rats, mice, possums and birds and constrict them before swallowing them whole. The other problem for this species of python is that they are a friendly and easy to handle snake, so many people would go out and collect them from the bush, selling them as pets. So unfortunately, the illegal pet trade and smuggling of these snakes has put pressure on their populations also. Where are you going, mate? Haven't finished making the video. This next animal is another reptile, but this reptile is a shelled reptile, a type of turtle. And this turtle is actually listed in the top 25 most endangered turtle species in the world. Unfortunately, many of Australia's turtle species are facing threats and are in decline. Habitat loss, pollution, and feral pests such as foxes and wild pigs that dig up turtles' nests and eat their eggs are threats a lot of our turtle species are now facing. This is Big Mary, and Mary is a Mary River turtle, only found in the Mary River in Queensland. Mary is quite a large turtle, and in fact, the Mary River turtle can grow to be one of Australia's largest freshwater turtles, which is estimated to be between maybe 50 or 60 years old. They were only just discovered in 1994, but were sold as penny turtles in pet shops well before that. This turtle species was harvested from the Mary River where they live and sold in pet shops all through Melbourne. Mary would have been one of those original turtles collected from the river when she was only a hatchling and then sent to Melbourne and sold in a pet store. She would have been kept as a pet for many years but got too big for a tank. She was then handed into the Melbourne Aquarium. There was an article in the paper about a rare turtle being handed into Melbourne Aquarium, so she's even famous. Once living at the aquarium for many years, she then came to live with me here at Wildlife Exposure. So really privileged to have such an amazingly rare and magnificent Mary River turtle. These turtles are known for their huge webbed feet. The males also have a massive tail that can be up to 70% of the length of its shell. They're a predatory turtle, predominantly eating fish and small animals. They're also known to eat pond weeds and other water plants. The Mary River turtle can be easily identified firstly by the cap of skin it has on its head and the dark coloration of its beak. Also the black mottled coloration on the bottom of their shell. The little dots under her chin are called barbels, and she'll use those to detect small animals moving around in the mud at the bottom of the river. Back before there were wildlife laws protecting our wildlife and stopping them being taken from the wild, Mary River turtles were harvested from the Mary River by their thousands. Collected when they were small hatchling, Mary would have been one of those original penny turtles, they were called, sold in pet shops. Unfortunately, so many of the small turtles were taken from the Mary River, there was not enough left there to grow into big mums and dads to then breed on themselves and bring the population back. And to this day, they are listed as one of the top 25 most endangered turtle species in the world. Like many of our critically endangered species, captive breeding programs and restoration and conservation of their remaining habitat is their only hope for the future. I hope you enjoyed meeting some of the vulnerable, threatened and endangered species that we care for here at Wildlife Exposure. And I hope seeing them up close and learning a bit about them has provoked you and inspired you to want to do more to understand what we can do to help protect our unique and precious wildlife. And remember, it's important now more than ever that we make a real conscious effort to be aware of the impacts we have on the environment. Recycle, reuse and reduce to help minimise our effect on the environment around us. Some things as simple as planting a native garden, leaving spaces for wildlife to share your backyard or property with, and helping to restore habitat for these animals can make a huge difference to our future and their future. Remember, we are nature, so to conserve wildlife is helping to conserve our future too. So let's do what we can and make a difference. Thanks for watching. Remember to take care of yourselves, look out for others and our wildlife. See you next time. If you want to take that extra step to help protect wildlife, support groups such as Bush Heritage Australia and other conservation organisations.